My husband never let me touch the lockbox. Not once in 6 years of marriage. It sat on the top shelf of his home office closet, behind a row of old tax folders, and every time I accidentally reached near it looking for a stapler, a spare charger, anything, he would appear in the doorway within seconds. "I'll get it," he'd say, calm, final, no explanation. I stopped asking about it after year 2. Some couples have things they don't discuss. I told myself that was ours. His name was Daniel. He was 39 when he died. A blood clot, the doctors said, the kind that forms silently and strikes without warning. He was at his desk at work on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, I was standing in a hospital corridor being told there was nothing they could do. We had been married 6 years. We had a rescue dog named Biscuit and a mortgage and dinner reservations for the following Saturday that I had made 3 weeks in advance because Daniel always forgot to book anywhere and then felt guilty about it. I was 31 years old and I did not know how to be a widow. The first week was a blur of casseroles and condolence cards and people sitting on my couch saying he was one of a kind, while I nodded and refilled their coffee, because having something to do with my hands was the only way I survived those hours. My mother flew in from Arizona. My best friend Jess took 2 weeks off work and slept on the air mattress in the spare room. People were kind. I was grateful. I felt like I was watching myself from slightly outside my own body, which I later learned was a normal grief response, but at the time just felt like going insane slowly and politely. It was Daniel's older sister Renata who brought up the lockbox. She came by on a Thursday, 11 days after the funeral. She brought flowers, white lilies, which I have always found slightly morbid at the best of times, and she sat at my kitchen table with her hands folded in that particular way she had, like she was always about to chair a meeting. Renata was 46 and worked in real estate development and had strong opinions about everything, delivered in a tone that made them sound like established facts. "I want to help you get organized," she said. "There's a lot to sort through and you shouldn't have to do it alone." I thanked her. I meant it. I was drowning in paperwork, estate filings, insurance claims, passwords I didn't have for accounts I didn't know existed. "Daniel kept a lockbox in his office," she said, and something about the way she said it made me look up from my coffee. Not the words themselves, the steadiness of her voice. The fact that she said it like she already knew exactly where it was. "I think it might have important documents. I can help you go through whatever's in there." "I don't have the key," I said. "It's a combination lock," she said. "Have you tried his birthday?" I had not tried anything. The thought of opening it had felt, somehow, like crossing a line, like the lockbox was still his, and Daniel was just temporarily somewhere else, and opening it without him would be a kind of trespass. Grief does that. It makes you protect the closed things. But I also noticed, in that moment, that Renata hadn't asked me if I knew about the lockbox. She'd assumed I did. She had walked into my kitchen and brought it up like it was a logical next step, like it had been on her mind. "I'll get to it," I said. "When I'm ready." She nodded, that same measured nod, and changed the subject. But before she left, she touched my arm in the hallway and said, very gently, "Don't wait too long. Some things have a timeline." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, and stared at the ceiling and thought about what she meant by timeline. Probate had timelines. Certain accounts had timelines. Was she warning me, or was she reminding herself? I tried his birthday the next morning. The lockbox didn't open. I tried our anniversary, our wedding date, the year we met. I tried Biscuit's birthday, which I realize sounds absurd, but Daniel loved that dog more than most humans, and I was running out of ideas. Nothing. I sat on the floor of his office for a long time after that. The room still smelled like him, coffee and cedar and the specific brand of hand lotion he used because he had chronically dry knuckles and was completely unbothered by anyone knowing he used hand lotion. I pressed my back against the side of his desk and I let myself cry in a way I hadn't quite managed yet, the ugly kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than sadness. When I stopped, I looked up at the shelf. The lockbox sat there, matte black, small enough to carry under one arm, indifferent to my grief. There was a small piece of masking tape on the bottom. I had never noticed it before. I stood up and pulled the box down and turned it over, and in Daniel's cramped handwriting, in faded pencil, were 6 digits. Not a birthday. Not an anniversary. A date I didn't recognize. I entered it. The lock clicked open. There was no cash, no secret second phone, none of the things a panicked, grieving mind conjures at 3 a.m. What was inside was quieter and stranger than any of that. There was a manila envelope, sealed, with my name on it in Daniel's handwriting. There was a USB drive. There was a folded piece of paper with a name and address on it, a law firm I didn't recognize, in a town about 40 minutes from where we lived. And there was a photograph. The photograph was of a cabin, small, wood-sided, surrounded by tall pines, a porch with 2 chairs, a gravel path leading to a dark blue front door. On the back, also in Daniel's handwriting, "For you, when you're ready. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you sooner." I sat with that sentence for a very long time. The law firm's name was Hargrove and Associates, and when I called them the following Monday, the woman who answered the phone already knew my name. "We've been expecting your call," she said. "Mr. Whitfield left instructions for us to be available whenever you reached out. No pressure on timing. Whenever you were ready." I made an appointment for that Thursday. I did not tell Renata. The lawyer's name was Patricia Hargrove, and she was exactly the kind of person you want in your corner when the world has recently become incomprehensible, steady, clear-eyed, with the specific warmth of someone who has sat across from a lot of people in the worst seasons of their lives and not looked away. She explained it to me simply. Daniel had purchased a property, the cabin in the photograph, 7 years ago, before we met. He had placed it in a separate trust, outside the joint estate, registered solely in my name 18 months ago. His signature, a notary stamp, a date from around the time I remembered him being swamped with paperwork and working late several nights in a row. "He transferred ownership to you proactively," Patricia said. "It's yours outright. It was never part of the joint estate, which means it falls entirely outside the standard probate process." "Why?" I said. "It came out smaller than I intended." She paused. He left a letter explaining his reasoning. "It's in the envelope. I think it will help." Then she told me one more thing. His sister, Renata, contacted our office approximately 2 weeks ago, before you called us. She represented herself as the estate executor and asked for information on your husband's property holdings. I looked at her. "She's not the executor," I said. "No," Patricia said. "You are." "We did not share any information with her, but I thought you should know she made contact." I drove home on autopilot. Jess was at my kitchen table when I got back, working on her laptop, and she took one look at my face and closed it. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her everything. Renata called that evening, as if on cue. She asked how I was doing. She asked about the estate paperwork. She mentioned offhandedly that she had done some research and believed it would be smart to start liquidating non-primary assets sooner rather than later to simplify the estate, and had I thought about whether Daniel had any other real property? I said I was still figuring things out. She said she was only trying to help. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. I thought about the lilies, the timeline comment, the locked box she somehow knew about, the law firm she had called before I did. How did she know to call them? The only way she could have known that law firm existed was if Daniel had told her or if she had found something among his things that I hadn't. Neither option made me feel better. I opened the manila envelope that night. Daniel's letter was 4 pages, handwritten on yellow legal paper in the handwriting I knew so well, cramped and leftward-leaning and entirely him. I am not going to reproduce everything he wrote because some of it was private in a way that still belongs only to me. But the essential things were these. The cabin had been a place he bought young, with money he'd saved obsessively in his mid-20s, with no plan except that he wanted to own a piece of land he had chosen himself. He had gone there alone, mostly. He had gone there to think. It was the first thing that had ever been entirely his, and that had mattered to him more than he'd known how to explain. When he met me, he wanted to bring me there. He planned to, many times. But he kept not doing it, and the longer he waited, the harder it became to explain the waiting. And then it became a thing he'd delayed so long it felt like a secret he was keeping, even though the secret was only ever the delay itself. "I was never hiding it from you to hurt you," he wrote. "I was hiding my own embarrassment at not knowing how to share the part of myself I loved most." He'd discovered, about 2 years into our marriage, that Renata knew about the cabin. He wasn't sure how. She had mentioned it once, casually, in a way that told him she had known for some time. He didn't confront her about it directly. That was Daniel, always more likely to quietly manage than openly confront, but he had started paying closer attention. What he found, over the following year, was not nothing. Renata had, on several occasions, asked pointed questions about the cabin's location, its size, whether it had been appraised recently, what the land around it was worth. She had looked up comparable properties in the area. She had, once, asked Daniel directly whether he had considered including it in his will or selling it while the market was good. Daniel was not naive. He was a quiet man, but not an oblivious one. He put the cabin in my name specifically and deliberately, with Patricia Hargrove handling the transfer, because he wanted to make sure that if anything ever happened to him, it couldn't be pulled into an estate dispute, couldn't be pressured into a sale, couldn't be touched by anyone who might have an interest in it that wasn't mine. I should have told you all of this myself, he wrote. I'm sorry I'm telling you this way. Go see it. Take Biscuit. Take Jess if you want company. Make it yours. The last line of the letter was, the combination is the date we brought Biscuit home. I always meant to change it to something more dignified, but I never did. I laughed out loud at that. In an empty room, alone, at 11 o'clock at night, I laughed out loud at my dead husband's joke, and then I cried again. But differently this time. Renata called twice the following week. I let both calls go to voicemail. Her messages were measured and warm and subtly persistent. She was thinking of me. She wanted to get together soon. She had some ideas she wanted to run by me when I had the bandwidth. I forwarded both voicemails to Patricia Hargrove. On a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after I found the lockbox, I drove 40 minutes out of town with Biscuit, in the passenger seat, and a thermos of coffee, and the photograph on the seat beside me. The GPS took me down a county road I had never been on, then a smaller road, then a gravel path through a stand of pines so tall they blocked the morning light into long cathedral stripes across the ground. And then there it was. The cabin. Smaller than I expected, which somehow made it better. A real porch with 2 real chairs, slightly weathered. A bird feeder Daniel had apparently installed and filled, at some point, because the pole was there even if it was empty now. The dark blue front door, exactly like in the photograph. I sat in the car for a moment with my hand on Biscuit's back and I breathed. Then I got out, and I walked up the gravel path, and I used the key Patricia had given me, and I opened the door. I'm not going to tell you it was a pristine, beautiful space. It was dusty, it needed airing out. There were coffee mugs on a shelf that had not been washed before Daniel locked up the last time he was here, which, based on a receipt I found tucked in a kitchen drawer, was about 14 months ago. He had driven out alone on a Wednesday, bought gas and a sandwich, and apparently spent an afternoon in a cabin he hadn't been able to bring himself to share with me yet. I washed the mugs. I opened every window. I sat in one of the porch chairs with my coffee while Biscuit examined every inch of the surrounding tree line with the seriousness of a very small detective. The USB drive, when I finally opened it on my laptop that evening, contained exactly what Daniel's letter had hinted it might, a folder of documentation he had compiled quietly, over about 18 months, of Renata's inquiries about the cabin, the property records she had pulled, a real estate contact she had been in communication with, and a timeline of her questions to him laid out in a document he had titled, with the extremely Daniel energy I had come to expect, simply, for context, just in case. He had not confronted her. He had not accused her of anything. He had simply documented, quietly and thoroughly, and made sure the person he trusted most had the full picture. I sat with it for a long time. Patricia Hargrove, when I called her Monday morning, was not surprised. She walked me through the options, all of them clearly and without pressure. I could do nothing, the cabin was mine, the transfer was ironclad, and there was nothing Renata could legally challenge if she tried. I could send a letter making clear I was aware of her inquiries and was not interested in selling, or I could do both. We sent the letter. I did not hear from Renata for almost 2 weeks after that. Then she called, and this time I picked up. She was different on the phone. The careful warmth was still there, layered over something tighter, and she said she hoped there were no hard feelings and that she had only ever wanted to help me navigate a complicated situation. She said she'd noticed, in the weeks after Daniel died, that there might be assets I didn't know about and she had thought it would be useful to get ahead of any complications. She said she had been looking out for me. I let her finish. I know about the property records you pulled, I said. I know about the real estate contacts. I know that you knew about the cabin long before Daniel died, and I know you called his law firm before I did. A pause, a long one. I'm not angry, I said, which was not entirely true, but was becoming truer as I said it out loud. But I want you to hear me when I tell you that the cabin is mine. I'm keeping it, and I don't need your help with any of it. She started to say something about family, something about Daniel wanting everyone to be. He put it in my name, I said. He did that on purpose. I think you know why. I heard her exhale. He loved you very much, she said, finally. And that part at least, I believed. We haven't spoken much since. There is no dramatic rupture, no screaming match, no legal showdown. Nothing that would make for a better story but would make for a worse life. She exists at a careful distance, and I allow that distance to remain. The cabin is mine. I have been back 4 times since that first Saturday morning. I repainted the front door same dark blue, but a shade richer, one I chose myself. I stocked the bird feeder. I learned that Biscuit, for reasons best known to himself, has appointed himself the personal guardian of the left porch chair and will allow no one to sit in it, which is objectively hilarious and also, I think, a little bit Daniel. I go there when I need to think. I go there when the apartment feels too loud with everything that used to fill it. I go there on Wednesday afternoons sometimes, for no reason except that a receipt in a kitchen drawer told me that Daniel liked to go there on Wednesdays, and being in a place where he was happy makes me feel something I do not have a perfect word for, not healed, not okay, but close to something real. He left me a letter and a photograph and a key and a place where the light comes through pine trees in the morning and lies across the floorboards in long quiet stripes, and he left me enough of himself in a lockbox on a shelf that when I finally opened it, I heard him clearly, after everything, explaining himself at last. I was never hiding it from you to hurt you. I know, Daniel. I know. I used to think that the hardest part of losing someone was the silence they leave behind. The empty chair. The coffee mug you wash out of habit before remembering. But I've learned something in the months since I found that lockbox on Daniel's shelf. The hardest part isn't the silence. It's figuring out what the silence was actually saying all along. Daniel kept that cabin from me for 6 years. Not out of deception. Not out of shame. Out of the very human difficulty of showing someone the part of yourself you love most and being terrified it won't be received the way you hoped. That's not a character flaw. That's just the cost of caring deeply about something. We protect the things that matter. Sometimes we protect them so carefully we build walls around them that the people we love can't see over. What I've come to understand is that actions accumulate. Everything Renata did, the early phone calls to the law firm, the property records, the careful maneuvering came from somewhere. It came from years of watching and calculating and deciding that what Daniel built quietly was something she could redirect. And everything Daniel did, the documentation, the letter, the transfer of the deed, came from somewhere too. It came from paying attention. From deciding that the person he loved deserved to be protected even after he was gone. That's the thing about integrity. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up. Quietly. In the choices a person makes when no one is watching. Or when they believe no one is. Daniel sat alone at a desk in a law office and signed papers that would mean nothing to him personally and everything to me eventually, and he did it without fanfare, without telling me, without any expectation of being thanked. That's not a grand gesture. That's character. And character, unlike grand gestures, actually holds up under pressure. I think about the kind of person I want to be when I'm the one in the position of choosing. When there's something to gain by moving quickly, by maneuvering, by getting there first, what do I do? What do any of us do? The answer to that question, made over and over in small moments nobody documents, is the answer to what kind of life we actually build. Grief has a way of forcing that question into the open. You lose someone and suddenly you're holding everything they left behind, not just their belongings, but their choices, their silences, their small acts of love, and their small failures. You have to decide what to carry forward and what to set down. I chose to carry the cabin. I chose to carry the letter. I chose to carry the version of Daniel who drove out alone on a Wednesday afternoon to a place he couldn't yet share, and sat on a porch and thought about how to be braver. I'm still working on being braver too. That's the honest ending. Not that everything resolved cleanly, it didn't, not entirely, but that I opened the box. That I read the letter. That I drove 40 minutes down a gravel road and walked through a dark blue door into a dusty room that smelled like pine and old coffee and someone I loved. And I stayed.